There are moments in history when distance feels less like geography, and more like a curtain drawn across something we're not meant to see. On one side of the world, beneath the long breadth of the Sahara, colossal pyramids rise from the Giza plateau, their geometry so severe and deliberate that even after 4,500 years, they appear less like ruins and more like declarations. On the other side of the planet, across an ocean, no pharaoh is known to have crossed. Stepped pyramids emerge from the jungles of Mesoamerica, lifting their terraces above the green canopy, as if the earth itself had decided to build a staircase toward the sky. How could two civilizations, separated by vast waters and centuries of silence, shape stone into the same upward gesture? Before letting your body drift deeper into this calm, take a quiet moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly feel drawn to what is unfolding here. And if you wish, share your location and your local time in the comments below. There is something quietly beautiful in knowing where each listener is resting tonight, somewhere under the same sky that once watched pyramids rise. The official narrative is clear, reassuring, almost comforting. The pyramids of ancient Egypt were built during the Old Kingdom, most famously the Great Pyramid attributed to Khufu around 2600 BCE. In Mesoamerica, pyramid building flourished much later, among cultures such as the Maya, and earlier at Teotihuacan. No credible archaeological evidence has demonstrated direct contact between these regions in antiquity. The oceans were barriers. The timelines do not overlap neatly, the genetic records do not intertwine. And yet, in Egypt, the Great Pyramid is aligned with true north with astonishing precision, deviating only slightly from perfect cardinal orientation. In the Yucatan at Chichen Itza, the temple of Kukulkan is oriented so that during the equinoxes, sunlight and shadow create the illusion of a serpent descending the staircase. Both cultures observed the heavens with care. Both embedded celestial cycles into stone. Both imagined architecture as a dialogue with the sky. If coincidence explains the similarity, it is a profound one. The Egyptian pyramid began as a mastaba, a flat-roofed tomb that evolved under the architect Imhotep into the step pyramid of Djoser. The shape ascended in stages, a stone approximation of a sacred mountain. Later pyramids smoothed those steps into clean plains, perhaps to evoke the primordial mound, the Benben, which in Egyptian cosmology emerged from the chaotic waters of Nun at the beginning of creation. Across the ocean, Mesoamerican civilizations raised stepped pyramids crowned with temples. These were not tombs in the Egyptian sense, but ceremonial platforms, stages for ritual, sacrifice, astronomical observation, yet they too evoked mountains. In Maya cosmology, the sacred mountain was a place of emergence, a portal between the underworld, the earthly plane, and the heavens. Water below, land rising, sky above. Is it simply that mountains command the human imagination? That any civilization seeking permanence, transcendence, or cosmic alignment would eventually build upward in diminishing tiers? Structural logic favors the pyramid. It is stable, resistant to gravity's slow insistence. A broad base tapering upward is a natural solution when working with stone. But practicality alone does not explain orientation to the stars. In Egypt, some researchers have proposed correlations between the layout of the Giza pyramids and the belt stars of Orion, a theory popularized in the 20th century and debated intensely since. Many Egyptologists reject precise stellar mapping claims, noting chronological and spatial inconsistencies, yet the broader truth remains. Egyptian architecture was infused with astronomy. The rising of Sirius marked the Nile's flood. The cosmos was not separate from governance or ritual. It was woven into both. Similarly, the Maya developed complex calendrical systems, the Tzolk'in, the Harb, and the long count, tracking cycles of Venus, solar years, and ritual intervals with extraordinary accuracy. Temples were positioned to capture solstices, equinoxes, zenith passages. Stone became an instrument for measuring time. Two civilizations, continents apart, treating architecture as a cosmic clock. If they did not speak to one another, then perhaps they were both listening to the same teacher. The sky was shared. Orion shone above the Nile and above the Yucatan alike. The sun rose reliably in the east for every culture. The Milky Way arched overhead in silent symmetry. It may be that human cognition, when confronted with such patterns, reaches instinctively for alignment, for structures that mirror the order perceived above. Yet there is another layer that unsettles the comfortable explanation. Sea levels were far lower during the last ice age. Vast coastal plains, now submerged, once hosted human communities. Around 12th to 800 years ago, the climate shifted dramatically during the period known as the Younger Dryas. Temperatures plunged in the northern hemisphere. Ice sheets advanced again before eventually retreating. When they melted, oceans rose by more than 100 meters over thousands of years, swallowing shorelines and any settlements built there. Marine archaeology is still young. Much of humanity's early story may lie beneath continental shelves, inaccessible or undiscovered. This is not evidence of a lost transoceanic empire linking Egypt and Mesoamerica. No credible excavation has revealed such a bridge. But it does suggest that the prehistoric world was dynamic, unstable, and capable of erasing its own footprints. If coastal networks once connected distant groups in ways we have not yet mapped, their traces could be hidden underwater. Or perhaps there were no such networks at all. Perhaps the silence is genuine. Even without contact, the parallels persist. Both civilizations revered cycles. Both built monumental centers that concentrated power, ritual, and astronomical knowledge. Both eventually experienced decline, political fragmentation, environmental strain, internal upheaval. The Old Kingdom collapsed into a period of decentralization. The classic Maya cities were gradually abandoned, their monuments reclaimed by forest. Why do such sophisticated systems fracture? Why does knowledge, once inscribed in stone, fail to preserve the society that carved it? History often emphasizes conquest, invasion, drought, mismanagement. All are plausible. Archaeology reveals evidence of changing rainfall patterns in the Maya lowlands. In Egypt, shifting political authority and economic stress reshaped the state. Yet there remains a haunting sense that something intangible also slips away when civilizations fall. A continuity of understanding, a coherence of worldview. When later empires rise, they inherit fragments. They reinterpret. They simplify. They filter the past through new doctrines, religious transformations, imperial narratives, colonial frameworks. All contribute to the shaping of what is remembered and what is dismissed. The 19th and early 20th centuries, when much of Egyptology and Mesoamerican archaeology were formalized, operated under their own assumptions. Diffusionism was debated, then largely rejected. Hyper-diffusionist theories claiming a single source for all civilizations lost credibility due to weak evidence. In response, the pendulum swung firmly toward independent development. Perhaps rightly so. But when the pendulum settles too rigidly at either extreme, curiosity narrows. It may be that no ship ever sailed from the Nile to the Gulf of Mexico in antiquity. It may be that no priest of Ra ever heard of Kukulkan. It may be that human societies separated by oceans nevertheless share deep cognitive patterns, a tendency to monumentalize, to align with the cosmos, to build mountains where none exist. Or perhaps there were faint whispers carried along forgotten coastlines long before the dates we assign to history's beginning. The desert preserves differently than the jungle. In Egypt, aridity guards stone from decay. In Mesoamerica, vegetation conceals and protects beneath layers of soil and root. What we see in both regions is only what has survived their climates, their wars, their reconstructions. Between sand and vine lies an absence. The question is not whether Egyptians met the Maya. There is no solid proof they did. The question is why, When confronted with two distant cultures shaping the Earth into stairways toward the stars, something in the human mind hesitates before accepting coincidence as the final word. Perhaps the resemblance is a mirror, reflecting not contact but common longing, a longing to rise above floodwaters, literal or symbolic, a longing to anchor time in stone, a longing to assert that beneath shifting skies and fragile dynasties something endures. And if that longing itself is ancient, older than Egypt, older than the Maya, then where did it first take root? Under which forgotten sky did the first artificial mountain rise, and who was watching when it did? If coincidence is the answer, then it is a coincidence shaped by gravity, by sky, and by the quiet architecture of the human mind. And yet the mind resists settling there too easily. The Egyptian pyramids of the 4th dynasty were not merely ambitious tombs, they were state projects of immense coordination. Quarrying teams carved limestone and granite, transport crews manoeuvred blocks along prepared causeways, labourers organised in rotating gangs left behind graffiti naming their work groups with almost playful pride. Excavations at workers' villages near Giza have revealed bakeries, breweries, barracks, evidence that these monuments were not the product of enslaved masses as once imagined, but of a complex, centralised society capable of mobilising resources with astonishing precision. Across the ocean, the pyramid complexes of the Maya and earlier Mesoamerican cultures likewise required social cohesion. At sites such as Tikal and Calakmul, rulers commissioned temples that rose above plazas large enough to gather thousands. Relief carvings recorded dynastic histories, celestial events, ritual performances. Construction was not random, it followed cosmological principles, often rebuilding over earlier structures in layered sequences, as if time itself were being buried and renewed in stone. In both regions, the pyramid was more than a building. It was a statement of order imposed upon landscape, but order emerges in response to something. The Nile flooded annually, predictable yet powerful. Its inundation was life-giving, yet it reminded Egypt of chaos held at bay. The Maya lowlands depended on seasonal rains and intricate water management. Drought could stretch for years, unsettling balance. Environmental pressures have been identified in paleoclimatic studies of the Maya collapse. Sediment cores and cave deposits suggest prolonged dry periods that strained agricultural systems. When nature's cycles grow unstable, societies respond, sometimes with innovation, sometimes with ritual intensification. Monumental architecture can be read as reassurance, a visible, immovable axis around which uncertainty revolves. Still, the shared impulse to monumentalize the sky invites deeper reflection. In Egypt, the afterlife journey of the pharaoh was imagined as an ascent, joining the imperishable stars that never set. Pyramid texts inscribed within later royal tombs speak of ladders to the heavens, of the king transforming into a star among stars. The pyramid slope may have symbolized that ascent, its smooth casing reflecting sunlight like a frozen ray. Among the Maya, rulers performed bloodletting rituals atop temple pyramids, invoking ancestors and deities associated with celestial bodies. The cosmos was layered, the underworld below, the earthly plane, the 13 levels of heaven above. Stele record dates with meticulous attention to cycles extending far into the past and future, suggesting an awareness of time that was both cyclical and monumental. Both cultures perceived verticality as sacred. Is vertical architecture an inevitable expression of hierarchical cosmology? Or does it reflect an archetype buried deep in collective memory? A primordial mountain rising from waters after catastrophe? Flood myths recur across continents. Mesopotamia's Epic of Gilgamesh tells of Utnapishtim surviving a deluge. Biblical tradition speaks of Noah. In Mesoamerican narratives, cycles of creation and destruction precede the current world. Egypt's cosmogony begins with watery chaos before land emerges. Scholars debate whether these stories share origins or reflect universal human responses to natural disasters such as river floods and post-glacial sea level rise. There is no consensus linking them into a single historical event, yet the pattern persists: water, destruction, renewal, elevation. After rising seas at the end of the last ice age, human populations migrated inland. Archaeological evidence indicates expanding settlements in river valleys: the Nile, the Tigris and Euphrates, the Indus, the Yellow River. Agriculture intensified. Monumentality followed. Mesoamerica developed independently, its domestication of maize marking a profound shift in subsistence. There is no accepted archaeological trace of Old World crops or livestock in pre-Columbian America. The separation appears genuine. Genetic studies reinforce divergence. The Atlantic remained an obstacle until much later, and yet the timeline of monumental construction across continents falls within a broader window of post-glacial stabilization. As climates warmed and ecosystems settled, complex societies emerged in multiple regions. Is it surprising then that similar forms arose under similar pressures? Perhaps what feels mysterious is not contact but convergence. Convergent evolution occurs in biology. Unrelated species develop analogous features because they respond to similar environmental challenges. Wings evolve in birds and bats independently. Could monumental pyramids be architecture's equivalent? Independent solutions to shared psychological and environmental needs? The pyramid is structurally stable. It resists collapse. It symbolizes permanence. It elevates elites physically above subjects, reinforcing hierarchy. It creates a focal point visible from afar. Its geometry is simple yet imposing. But there remains a subtler unease. Why align so carefully with cardinal directions? Why embed astronomical precision beyond what agriculture alone demands? The Maya tracked Venus cycles with remarkable detail, associating them with warfare and prophecy. Egyptians calibrated calendars to the heliacal rising of Sirius, linking celestial observation to agricultural renewal. Astronomy required patience, generational continuity. Knowledge passed down through priesthoods, preserved in codices and inscriptions. When conquerors arrived, Spanish colonizers in Mesoamerica, later empires in Egypt, manuscripts were destroyed, temples repurposed, interpretations filtered through new belief systems. Much has been lost not only to erosion, but to deliberate replacement. This does not imply a hidden conspiracy linking Maya and Egyptians. Rather, it acknowledges that our window into the past is fractured. We reconstruct based on what remains, aware that absence can distort as much as presence. In the 19th century, European explorers encountering Mesoamerican pyramids sometimes speculated wildly about lost tribes of Israel or Egyptian refugees, reflecting biases of their era. Modern archaeology rightly corrected those narratives, grounding interpretation in material evidence. Yet in rejecting unfounded diffusionism, has inquiry become too cautious to ask broader philosophical questions? What if the resemblance between pyramids is neither proof of contact nor trivial coincidence, but testimony to something intrinsic to human consciousness? Imagine a community facing mortality, seasonal unpredictability, and the immensity of the night sky. Imagine the desire to inscribe meaning onto Earth itself, to build a structure that anchors ritual, power, and memory. The pyramid may arise not from borrowed blueprint but from existential necessity. And still, one wonders about the first artificial mountain ever raised. We tend to assume progress, from simple huts to complex temples, but the archaeological record is incomplete. Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Anatolia, dating back over 11,000 years, revealed monumental stone pillars erected by hunter-gatherers long before agriculture was firmly established. Its discovery unsettled assumptions about when complex ritual architecture began. If monumental building emerged earlier than once thought, how many other sites remain buried or submerged? Perhaps the impulse to raise stone toward heaven predates both Egypt and the Maya by millennia. Perhaps it surfaced independently wherever humans felt the weight of time pressing upon fragile lives. The oceans separate continents, but the sky unites them. Under Orion's belt, under the arc of the Milky Way, countless generations looked upward and wondered what endured beyond their brief existence. Stone offered a reply, slow, patient, resistant to decay. So the pyramids stand not as evidence of secret voyages, but as monuments to shared longing. Yet longing itself has origins, somewhere between catastrophe and stability, between flood and field, between memory and forgetting. The idea of the sacred mountain crystallized. It travelled not by ship, but by mind. If that is so, then the true connection between Egypt and Mesoamerica is neither trade nor migration, but something quieter, a convergence of human imagination under the same indifferent stars. But imagination is shaped by experience. What ancient experience, now obscured by time, first taught humanity to build mountains of stone? What ancient experience, now obscured by time, first taught humanity to shape Earth into a staircase for the sky? The question lingers, not because there is evidence of a single forgotten empire stretching from the Nile to the Yucatan, but because the recurrence of certain ideas feels older than the monuments themselves. Archaeology, cautious and methodical, builds its conclusions from pottery fragments, radiocarbon samples, inscriptions, stratigraphy. It does not traffic in intuition, and yet intuition has often preceded discovery. When Spanish chroniclers first described the towering temples of the Maya and the Mexica, Europe struggled to reconcile these achievements with prevailing assumptions about the New World. Later excavations revealed deep chronologies, layered cities built atop earlier cities, calendars carved into stone with mathematical sophistication. The Maya long count traced cycles back to mythic creation dates in 3114 BCE, inscribing time not as a straight line but as a vast turning wheel. In Egypt, king lists extended reigns into semi-mythical antiquity. The Turin king list and the writings of Manetho recorded dynasties that stretched back beyond the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. Even within these records there is ambiguity. Rulers whose historicity is debated, reigns that blur into legend. Both civilizations remember deeper pasts than their surviving monuments alone reveal. Time, in both worlds, was not shallow. In the Nile Valley, annual floods structured life so predictably that cosmic order, or Ma'at, became a central principle. The pharaoh was not merely a ruler, but a guarantor of balance between earth and sky. His pyramid was a testament to stability, a stone assurance that order would continue beyond death. In the Maya lowlands, time was tracked through interlocking calendars that meshed ritual and solar cycles, steely commemorated endings of baktuns, marking completions within an immense count that extended billions of days into the future. The architecture itself often encoded numerological symbolism, terraces reflecting cosmological numbers, staircases aligned to celestial events. If there was no contact, then perhaps there was shared vulnerability. The end of the last ice age was not a gentle transition. Geological records indicate episodes of rapid warming and cooling, glacial meltwater pulses that reshaped coastlines. Human groups adapted, migrated, reorganized. Oral traditions carried through generations may have preserved memories of flood, fire, darkness, and renewal. These memories, though reshaped by myth, could have influenced later cosmologies. But myth is not map, it is reflection. The temptation to see global synchronization in these patterns must be tempered by evidence. To date, no artifact conclusively links Egypt and pre-Columbian America. No Old World metal has been found in a securely dated pre-Columbian Mesoamerican context. No American maize pollen has been identified in ancient Egyptian strata. linguistic comparisons between hieroglyphs and Maya glyphs reveal entirely different systems of structure and origin. The separation appears real, and yet separation does not negate resonance. Consciousness, when confronted with mortality, tends to seek permanence. Burial mounds predate pyramids in many regions. From Neolithic Europe to ancient Asia, humans raised earth over the dead, marking sacred spaces with vertical emphasis. Over centuries, earth became stone, and stone became geometry. The pyramid may be less a borrowed design and more an inevitability, but inevitability itself can feel mysterious. Consider the precision with which Egyptian builders oriented their pyramids to cardinal directions. Scholars have proposed methods involving stellar observations, perhaps sighting circumpolar stars to establish true north. Such techniques required careful measurement and repeated observation. In Mesoamerica, architectural alignments correspond to solstitial sunrise and sunset points, zenith passages of the sun, and Venus cycles. These were not accidental placements. Why invest such effort in celestial alignment? Because the sky was the ultimate constant. Dynasties rose and fell, but stars returned nightly in reliable patterns. To align with them was to embed human authority within cosmic order. Still, something unsettles the narrative of pure independence. The shape of the pyramid is not the only similarity. It is the integration of astronomy, ritual, and political power that parallels so strongly. Both civilizations concentrated sacred authority at elevated centers. Both encoded time into architecture. Both experienced phases of monumental intensity followed by fragmentation. Could it be that once human societies reach a certain threshold of complexity, agricultural surplus, centralized authority, priestly class, they naturally converge towards similar expressions of permanence and cosmic integration? Perhaps complexity itself carries a template. Yet templates imply structure, and structure suggests recurrence. In the forests of Guatemala and southern Mexico, modern LIDAR surveys have revealed vast networks of previously hidden cities, causeways and terraces beneath dense canopy. What once seemed isolated ceremonial centres now appear as interconnected urban landscapes. In Egypt, ongoing excavations continue to refine understanding of worker organisation, quarry logistics, and social hierarchy. Each new discovery complicates the picture. As knowledge deepens, the simplistic notion of isolated marvels gives way to recognition of intricate systems. The pyramids were not anomalies, but culminations of centuries of development. And yet, development implies origin. Where did the first impulse toward monumental verticality begin? Not geographically, but psychologically. It may have begun the first time humans gathered collectively to mark a sacred site. A hill, a cave, a spring, and decided to enhance it, to make it more visible, more enduring, more aligned with sky and memory. The act of building upward may be a response to existential awareness, a defiance of erosion. In that sense, Egypt and the Maya were not connected by ship or caravan, but by shared humanity. Still, there is one more layer of ambiguity. History as we receive it has passed through many filters: conquest, colonization, academic interpretation, national identity. The destruction of Maya codices by Spanish clergy drastically reduced primary sources. Much of what is known comes from inscriptions carved in stone and fragments preserved by chance. Egyptian knowledge, too, was reinterpreted through Greek and later Roman lenses before modern Egyptology emerged. The past we reconstruct is always partial. This does not mean there is a hidden conspiracy erasing a global connection, but it does mean that absence of evidence is not identical to evidence of absence. The ocean floor remains largely unexplored. Coastal sites from earlier epochs may lie submerged. If early seafaring occurred more widely than currently documented, its traces may be subtle, perishable, lost. Yet even if no such voyages ever happened, the deeper mystery remains intact. Why does the human story repeatedly circle back to stone mountains under stars? Why do separated civilizations invest immense labour into aligning themselves with cosmic cycles? Perhaps because time is both enemy and teacher. Stone slows time, alignment orders it, ritual narrates it. In Egypt and in Mesoamerica, pyramids became instruments against forgetting. And perhaps that is the most profound connection of all, not trade, not migration, but resistance to oblivion. Still, resistance implies prior loss. What ancient loss, environmental, cultural, or spiritual, compelled humanity to carve permanence from fragile earth? What ancient loss, environmental, cultural, or spiritual, compelled humanity to carve permanence from fragile earth? Loss leaves traces even when evidence erodes. It lingers in ritual, in architecture, in the repetition of forms whose original meaning may have faded. When a civilization builds upward in stone, it is not merely displaying power, it is negotiating with time. In Egypt, the transition from the early dynastic period to the Old Kingdom marked a consolidation of authority that allowed monumental ambition to flourish. The step pyramid of Giza did not appear fully formed. It emerged from earlier burial traditions, gradually expanding from mastaba to layered structure. Each addition was an experiment in scale and symbolism. By the time Khufu's pyramid rose, architectural confidence had matured into breathtaking precision. The Maya world experienced its own architectural evolution. Early ceremonial platforms preceded the towering temples of the classic period. Sites such as El Mirador reveal colossal constructions dating back centuries before the apogee of Tikal or Palenque. These were not isolated bursts of genius, but accumulations of knowledge across generations. Both regions demonstrate continuity before monumentality. Continuity suggests stability, yet stability is fragile. Climatological research indicates that the Sahara was once greener, supporting pastoral communities before gradual aridification pushed populations toward the Nile. Environmental pressure can catalyze centralization. Shared scarcity fosters shared identity. The river valley became not only a resource, but a spine along which culture crystallized. In Mesoamerica, paleo-environmental studies point to cycles of drought and abundance. The Maya engineered reservoirs, terraces, and water systems to manage variability. But even ingenuity cannot always overcome sustained climatic stress. The so-called collapse of the classic Maya period around the 9th century CE appears to have involved political fragmentation intertwined with environmental strain. When environments shift, societies adapt or fracture. Could the impulse toward monumentality be strongest in periods following upheaval? A response to instability, an attempt to assert continuity against uncertainty? After the Younger Dryas and the subsequent stabilization of the Holocene climate, agriculture expanded globally. Sedentary communities grew. Surplus allowed specialization. Priests, astronomers, architects. Monumental structures such as Göbekli Tepe predate full agricultural systems, challenging the assumption that farming necessarily preceded complex ritual architecture. The relationship between belief and subsistence may be more intertwined than once believed. Perhaps the first great structures were not products of surplus, but catalysts for it, shared projects that forged cohesion in uncertain times. In that light, the pyramid becomes not only a tomb or temple, but a social anchor. Egyptian pyramids were surrounded by mortuary complexes, causeways, temples, and worker settlements. They were nodes within broader sacred landscapes. Similarly, Maya pyramids were integrated into plazas, ball courts, palaces, and roadways known as Sak-Biob. These were urban environments, ceremonial and administrative centers interwoven. Architecture here is a network, not an isolated marvel. And yet, the eye is drawn to the upward tapering mass, the mountain that did not exist before human hands assembled it. Mountains in many cultures are thresholds. Sinai in Near Eastern tradition, Olympus in Greek mythology, the cosmic mountain Meru in South Asian cosmology. The idea of a central elevation connecting realms recurs widely. It is tempting to interpret pyramids within this broader symbolic grammar, but grammar does not require contact. It requires shared cognition. Human perception organizes space vertically, above and below, heaven and underworld. Even without shared language, such metaphors arise naturally from embodied experience. The sky is inaccessible yet visible. The earth supports yet confines. To build upward is to blur that boundary. Still, there is a subtle distinction between natural mountain and artificial one. A natural mountain is given, an artificial mountain is declared. Declaration implies intention. When the Great Pyramid was completed, its white limestone casing would have reflected sunlight intensely, visible from miles away. It would have dominated horizon and imagination alike. In the dense jungles of the Maya lowlands, temple pyramids pierced canopy, marking centers of authority visible above forest. Visibility reinforces legitimacy. The rulers associated with these structures linked themselves to cosmic cycles. Egyptian pharaohs embodied Horus in life and Osiris in death. Maya kings staged rituals atop pyramids to communicate with deities and ancestors, reinforcing their mediating role between worlds. Political power and cosmic alignment intertwined. Does this intertwining reflect a universal pattern in early state formation? As anthropologists observe, when societies scale up, symbolic systems often grow more elaborate, anchoring authority in myth and cosmology. Yet something about the pyramid transcends mere governance. Unlike palaces, which decay or are repurposed, pyramids endure. They resist reinterpretation. Even stripped of casing stones or overgrown with vegetation, their mass persists. In both Egypt and Mesoamerica, later generations built upon earlier pyramids, encasing older cores within new layers. Archaeologists have discovered nested structures, a pyramid within a pyramid. Time is literally stratified, previous sanctuaries entombed within newer expressions. This layering echoes memory itself. Memory rarely disappears completely. It is covered, reframed, partially concealed. When Spanish colonizers dismantled temples to build churches, foundations sometimes remained beneath. When later dynasties in Egypt altered religious emphasis, older monuments still stood, their inscriptions eroded but legible. History overlays but does not fully erase. Perhaps the deeper mystery lies not in similarity of form but in recurrence of layering, a repeated human act of building upon what came before, sometimes preserving, sometimes obscuring. If there were earlier experiments in monumentality now lost to sea level rise or erosion, their influence might persist not through direct contact but through inherited patterns of thought, passed along migratory pathways thousands of years earlier. Human populations spread from Africa tens of thousands of years ago, carrying shared cognitive frameworks long before pyramids emerged. In that sense, Egypt and the Maya share ancestry not of culture but of mind. The mind that left Africa under Ice Age skies is the same mind that later carved limestone in Giza and shaped limestone blocks in Yucatan. Separation does not sever that lineage. Yet lineage alone does not dispel unease, because when two distant civilizations converge not only in architecture, but in cosmological orientation, in calendar complexity, in monumental assertion of time against mortality, the resemblance feels heavier than coincidence. Perhaps it is not coincidence, but inevitability. Perhaps under stable climate, agricultural surplus and centralized authority, human societies almost inevitably express themselves in stone mountains aligned with stars. If so, then the pyramids are less anomalies and more milestones, markers of a threshold crossed repeatedly in different lands. But thresholds imply crossing from one state into another. What inner transformation allowed humanity to imagine itself capable of reshaping Earth so profoundly? What psychological shift preceded the first decision to turn soil into geometry and horizon into instrument? Somewhere between fear of chaos and desire for order, between memory of flood and anticipation of drought, the decision was made, stone was lifted, angles were measured, the sky was consulted, and the earth began to rise in deliberate symmetry. But symmetry invites further questions. If the pyramid is the answer humanity repeatedly offers to time and uncertainty, what unanswered question lies beneath its foundation? If the pyramid is the answer humanity repeatedly offers to time and uncertainty, what unanswered question lies beneath its foundation? Foundations are rarely visible. They are buried deliberately, supporting weight without drawing attention. In Egypt, the bedrock of the Giza plateau was cut and levelled with careful precision before the first stones were laid. The builders did not begin with spectacle. They began with alignment, establishing a base that would endure millennia of wind and shifting sand. In Mesoamerica, pyramids were often erected over earlier sacred spots, sometimes natural elevations modified and expanded. Excavations reveal earlier temples entombed within later constructions, sealed and preserved like fossils within stone. The act of building upward was inseparable from the act of building upon. Every monument, then, conceals an earlier story. The unanswered question may not concern contact between civilizations, but continuity within them. What thread runs through generations strongly enough to compel such sustained effort? To quarry, transport, measure and assemble hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, of stones in the name of a cosmological vision. It is tempting to see power as the driving force. Certainly rulers benefited from these structures. In Egypt, pyramid complexes reinforced divine kingship. The pharaoh's association with cosmic order justified centralized authority. In the Maya world, inscriptions on stelae recount dynastic victories, alliances and rituals, embedding political history within sacred space. Yet power alone does not lift stone. Labour requires belief. Belief requires narrative. Archaeological evidence from workers' settlements near Giza suggests that those who laboured on the pyramids were organised, provisioned, and likely motivated by participation in a project of national and religious significance. They left behind inscriptions identifying themselves as friends of Khufu or drunkards of Menkaure, hints of identity and camaraderie rather than coerced anonymity. Similarly, Maya construction would have involved coordinated labour drawn from surrounding populations. Ceremonial centres were not isolated, they were integrated into agricultural and trade networks. The erection of a temple pyramid likely carried communal meaning beyond the ruler's ambition. When communities build together, they affirm shared cosmology. Perhaps that cosmology contained memories, not of transoceanic exchange, but of fragility, of cycles observed over generations, of floods, droughts, eclipses, celestial events that defied immediate explanation. The night sky, unchanged across continents, provided a map of recurrence. Constellations rose and set predictably. The solstice returned unfailingly. Even comets and supernovae, rare but dramatic, left impressions that could ripple through myth. In 1054 CE, Chinese astronomers recorded a supernova visible in daylight. Its remnant is now known as the Crab Nebula. There is debate among scholars about whether similar events were noted in Mesoamerican inscriptions. Such celestial phenomena would have reinforced the perception of a sky alive with meaning. Egyptian texts describe stars as souls of the deceased. The Maya associated certain celestial bodies with deities and cycles of renewal. The heavens were not distant, they were participatory. When a civilization integrates astronomy into architecture, it declares that human life is embedded within a larger pattern. But patterns can comfort and constrain. Calendrical systems create expectation. When predicted cycles align with reality, confidence grows. When they fail, when drought persists beyond anticipated intervals, uncertainty intensifies. The collapse of the classic Maya period has been examined through lenses of warfare, ecological strain, and political fragmentation. In Egypt, the first intermediate period followed the Old Kingdom's monumental era, marked by decentralization and shifts in power. In both cases, centralized authority fractured. Monuments remained, but the systems that produced them faltered. What happens when a society's cosmic narrative no longer stabilizes its material conditions? It adapts, it reforms, or it dissolves into smaller units. Yet dissolution does not erase architecture. The pyramids endure beyond the ideologies that birthed them. This endurance shapes our perception. We see the monuments and imagine permanence, yet the societies that constructed them were dynamic, vulnerable, evolving. Perhaps the unanswered question beneath the pyramid is not about external connection, but internal transformation. At what point did humans decide that memory must be externalized in stone rather than entrusted solely to oral tradition? Oral cultures preserve astonishing detail across generations, yet stone offers resistance to forgetting. Inscription secures narrative against distortion, at least for a time. Egyptian hieroglyphs and Maya glyphs are structurally distinct, products of independent linguistic evolution. Their scripts developed within unique cultural matrices, and yet both carved words into monuments, embedding language into architecture. Language became landscape. The act of inscribing stone with cosmic and political meaning suggests anxiety about transience. Human life is brief, stone endures, but stone too erodes. Wind scours limestone, jungle roots fracture masonry, earthquakes tilt walls. Even the most imposing pyramid is subject to geological patience. Perhaps monumentality is less about defeating time and more about conversing with it, acknowledging mortality while extending memory slightly further along the horizon. If so, then Egypt and the Maya were engaged in similar conversations under different skies. The question of contact becomes less urgent than the question of consciousness. Consciousness recognizes impermanence. It seeks pattern. It encodes pattern in architecture. When separated populations reach comparable levels of social complexity and astronomical observation, they may converge not through exchange but through shared existential inquiry. And yet, existential inquiry does not fully dissolve the sense of mystery, because there remains the possibility that humanity's deep past contains chapters still unread. Submerged coastlines, buried settlements, unexcavated layers may yet refine our understanding of how ideas travelled or arose. The Atlantic, once perceived as absolute barrier, is now understood as traversable even with relatively simple vessels. Evidence of Polynesian contact with South America before European arrival has been proposed based on botanical and genetic studies, though interpretations continue to evolve. Such examples remind us that ancient mobility may have been more nuanced than once assumed. But nuance is not confirmation. Between certainty and speculation lies a quiet space where inquiry resides. Perhaps the unanswered question beneath the pyramid is not who taught whom, but what compelled all to look upward in the first place. Fear of chaos, awe of stars, memory of flood, desire for order. The pyramid stands as a response, a geometry of reassurance. Yet reassurance implies doubt. What doubt, shared across continents, pressed humanity to anchor itself so firmly to cardinal directions and celestial cycles? What tremor beneath the surface of early civilization made stability sacred? The stones do not answer. They simply remain, casting shadows that shift with the sun, reminding each generation that questions endure longer than empires. And as those shadows lengthen across desert and jungle alike, the silence beneath the foundations feels less like emptiness and more like invitation. Invitation to ask not only how such structures resemble one another, but why the human story itself seems to rise, collapse, and rise again in patterns as deliberate as the angles of a pyramid. Invitation implies willingness to step closer, to listen not only to what remains standing, but to what has fallen silent. Silence is deceptive. It suggests absence, yet it often conceals transformation. When the Great Pyramid was new, its surface gleamed in polished limestone, reflecting sunlight so intensely it may have appeared almost luminous against the desert. Today, its outer casing is largely gone, stripped in later centuries for building projects in Cairo. What we see is the core, rougher, less pristine than its original intention. In Mesoamerica, pyramids once painted in vivid reds, blues and whites now appear as muted stone beneath vegetation. Stucco facades have weathered away. The colour has drained, leaving only shape. Time has altered their appearance, but not their presence. What if the similarity between Egyptian and Maya pyramids is also a matter of what time has stripped away? The forms remain, while the contexts that shape them have faded. We compare geometry without fully grasping the texture of daily life, the subtleties of belief, the lived rhythms that surrounded these monuments. Egyptian farmers along the Nile would have measured seasons by flood and retreat, by planting and harvest. Maya farmers in the lowlands navigated cycles of rainfall and drought, adapting to thin soils and dense forest. Their agricultural systems differed profoundly, wheat and barley versus maize and beans, yet both societies depended on environmental predictability. Predictability fosters pattern recognition. Pattern recognition fosters cosmology. Cosmology fosters monument. When patterns falter, monument becomes reassurance. There is evidence that both Egypt and the Maya experienced periods of climatic stress. In Egypt, inscriptions from later periods refer to years of low Nile floods, famine, and social unrest. In the Maya region, speleothem records from caves indicate multi-year droughts coinciding with political fragmentation. Yet neither civilization vanished entirely. They transformed. Egypt shifted through dynasties, foreign rule, religious reformations. The Maya world reconfigured into post-classic polities, maintaining language and culture even as urban centres declined. The pyramids outlasted centralized power, becoming relics of earlier certainties. Certainty is fragile. When early archaeologists encountered these structures, they often projected their own frameworks onto them. 19th century explorers, influenced by biblical narratives and classical traditions, speculated about lost tribes, diffusion from Egypt to the Americas, or remnants of Atlantis. These theories, lacking solid evidence, eventually receded under the scrutiny of systematic archaeology. Modern scholarship emphasizes independent development, supported by stratigraphy, carbon dating, and comparative linguistics. The data align with separation. And yet, intellectual correction can sometimes overcorrect, closing imaginative space where inquiry might still be warranted, not to assert hidden connections, but to explore deeper human commonalities. Consider the mathematics embedded in pyramid construction. The Great Pyramid's proportions have been examined for possible relationships to pi and the golden ratio. While many popular claims exaggerate intentional precision, it is undeniable that Egyptian builders possessed sophisticated geometric understanding. They measured angles with care, achieving slopes that balanced structural integrity and symbolic intent. Mesoamerican architects likewise demonstrated advanced planning. The layout of Teotihuacan, with its Avenue of the Dead and massive Pyramid of the Sun, reflects deliberate urban design aligned roughly with celestial phenomena. Although Teotihuacan predates the classic Maya peak, its influence extended across Mesoamerica, shaping later architectural traditions. Geometry became a language of permanence. Why geometry? Because it transcends dialect. A triangle is understood without translation. Alignment to north requires no shared vocabulary, only observation. Perhaps the pyramid form is a universal grammar of stability. But grammar can carry accent. Egyptian pyramids, particularly during the Old Kingdom, tended towards smooth faces and internal chambers designed for burial. Maya pyramids often featured steep staircases, temple structures atop, and public accessibility for ritual performance. The external similarity conceals functional divergence. This divergence matters. If two civilizations arrive at similar forms for different immediate purposes, it strengthens the case for convergence rather than contact. Yet convergence does not eliminate wonder, because convergence implies that under certain conditions, human societies will consistently generate similar answers. What conditions? Agricultural surplus sufficient to free labour for monumental projects, centralised authority capable of organising that labour, a cosmology that elevates celestial observation, environmental cycles that demand calendar precision. When these variables align, perhaps the pyramid emerges as a near-inevitable solution, both structurally and symbolically. But inevitability still carries mystery. Why do humans seek to externalize cosmic order in stone rather than solely in narrative or ritual? Why commit so much energy to materializing belief? Materialization transforms belief into landscape. It anchors intangible concepts in visible form. A pyramid is not easily ignored. It commands attention across generations. Children born centuries after its completion grow up in its shadow. They internalize its presence as part of reality. Perhaps that is the deepest function of monumentality, to naturalize ideology. In Egypt, the pyramid affirmed divine kingship. In the Maya world, temple pyramids stage rituals reinforcing the ruler's intermediary role between worlds. The structures were not neutral, they shaped perception. And yet, long after the political systems that commissioned them faded, the pyramids remain as enigmas. Modern visitors stand before them not as subject but as observers. The ideological context has dissolved. The geometry persists. This persistence invites projection. We project mystery where certainty once stood. We ask whether knowledge was lost, whether contact occurred, whether hidden chapters await discovery. Some questions arise from genuine gaps in evidence, others from discomfort with simplicity. Perhaps the simplest explanation, independent development, is accurate. But simplicity does not diminish depth. If Egypt and the Maya independently converged on pyramidal architecture aligned with celestial cycles, it suggests something profound about human cognition. It suggests that when confronted with vastness, sky, time, mortality, humans repeatedly craft upward gestures of stone. The gesture matters more than the route by which it spread. Still, there is a quiet tension beneath that realization. Because if monumental convergence is intrinsic to complex society, then history may not be linear progress, but cyclical emergence. Civilizations rise, align with cosmos, assert permanence, then fragment, leaving behind mountains as evidence of aspiration. Mountains that later cultures reinterpret, study, and sometimes misunderstand. In this light, the resemblance between Egyptian and Maya pyramids is not anomaly, but echo. An echo across continents of a shared human response to uncertainty. Yet echoes imply an original sound. What was the first cry into the vastness that required stone to answer it? What was the first cry into the vastness that required stone to answer it? Long before limestone was cut at Giza, long before temples rose above the jungles of Peten, there were hands shaping earth into modest mounds. Burial sites from the Neolithic period across multiple continents reveal early gestures toward elevation. Earth was piled gently over the dead, marking presence where absence had settled. These were not yet pyramids, but they were the beginning of something. An instinct to raise the ground where memory demanded permanence. Perhaps the first cry was grief. Grief has weight. It presses downward. To build upward in response may be less an act of ambition and more an act of balance. Elevation compensates for loss. A mound over a body becomes a reminder that death does not flatten significance. In Egypt, the earliest mastabas were rectangular structures with sloping sides, modest precursors to the grandeur that followed. They evolved slowly, layer upon layer, experimentation upon experimentation. Innovation was gradual. Geometry sharpened across generations. In Mesoamerica, early ceremonial platforms similarly predate towering pyramids. At La Venta, among the Olmec, a civilization preceding the Maya, earthen mounds and monumental stone heads marked sacred spaces. The Olmec left no pyramids of Giza's scale, yet they cultivated iconography and ritual complexity that would echo through later cultures. Development did not occur in isolation from environment. It unfolded within landscapes shaped by tectonics, rivers, forests, and droughts. Landscape teaches scale. The Nile Valley's flat expanses contrast sharply with the jagged mountains of Mesoamerica. Yet in both regions, artificial elevation created visual dominance where nature did not provide it in the immediate vicinity. A pyramid on a flat plain commands horizon. A stepped temple above dense canopy pierces green obscurity. Perhaps the first cry was not only grief, but orientation. Human beings seek center. In an expansive landscape, a vertical structure defines axis, a place to gather, to measure direction, to anchor movement. Anthropologists speak of axis mundi, a world axis connecting realms. The concept appears in many traditions independently. But why independently? Because verticality is intuitive. The human body itself is vertical. We stand upright, our heads oriented towards sky, our feet rooted in earth. Our own form becomes metaphor for cosmology. If the body is axis, the pyramid magnifies that axis to monumental scale. Egyptian cosmology articulated layered realms, the duat, the earthly world, the celestial domain. Maya cosmology described multiple layers of underworld and heaven. Though culturally distinct, both imagined stratified universes. Stratification invites structure. Structure invites architecture. And architecture, once established, becomes tradition. Tradition accumulates authority. Authority channels labour. Labour lifts stone. Still there remains the question of memory, not of contact between Egypt and Mesoamerica, but of deeper human inheritance. Genetic studies trace humanity's origins to Africa tens of thousands of years ago. Migrations dispersed populations across continents long before pyramids existed. Along those migrations travelled cognitive frameworks, pattern recognition, symbolic thought, narrative capacity. Symbolic thought predates agriculture. Cave paintings in Lascaux and Chauvet reveal astronomical interpretations proposed by some researchers, though debate continues. Whether or not specific constellations are depicted, the presence of abstract symbolism is undeniable. Humans have long sought to interpret sky. When agriculture fixed populations to place, sky interpretation intensified. Stationary observation allows precise measurement. Calendars emerge from repeated attention. Egyptian priests likely tracked stellar movements over generations. Maya astronomer priests did the same. Knowledge accumulated slowly, encoded in architecture and inscription. Perhaps the first cry into the vastness was awe. Awe can be destabilizing. It shrinks the individual. To build monumental architecture is to respond with magnitude, to assert that human creativity can mirror cosmic scale. The pyramid is awe-crystallized, yet awe alone does not explain durability. Durability suggests anticipation of audience beyond the present generation. Builders knew they would not see the end of their projects. The Great Pyramid likely took decades. Maya temples were often expanded and rebuilt across centuries. They built for descendants. Descendants inherit not only structure but story, but stories fracture. The Maya collapse reminds us that knowledge can be lost within living memory. Spanish destruction of codices erased vast textual archives. Egyptian hieroglyphs became unreadable for centuries until the Rosetta Stone enabled decipherment in the 19th century. Silence can endure millennia. If contact had occurred between Egypt and Mesoamerica, We might expect linguistic traces, shared material culture, genetic overlap. None has been convincingly demonstrated. The silence between continents appears genuine, and yet, beneath that silence, there is resonance. Resonance does not require transmission. It requires similarity of question. What is our place in the cosmos? How do we anchor time? How do we ensure memory? The pyramid answers, by building a mountain that refuses to dissolve easily. Perhaps the first cry into the vastness was fear. Fear of chaos returning, fear of flood, fear of forgetting. Geological memory of post-glacial sea level rise may have lingered in collective consciousness. Coastal communities displaced inland carried stories of swallowed lands, while direct evidence linking specific flood myths to specific sea level events remains debated. The psychological imprint of environmental instability is plausible. In such contexts, permanence becomes sacred. Egypt's Mayat represented cosmic order against chaos. Maya cosmology framed cycles of creation and destruction. Both grappled with instability through structured ritual and monumental expression. If convergence is real, it suggests that under certain existential pressures, human societies repeatedly externalize order in stone. But existential pressures vary across geography. The Nile's predictability differs from Mesoamerica's variability. The Sahara's encroachment differs from tropical drought cycles, and yet both regions fostered pyramid building. Perhaps the deeper pattern lies not in environment alone but in threshold. The threshold from village to city, from kinship networks to state structures. Monumental architecture often emerges when societies cross into complex hierarchy. Hierarchy requires legitimization. Legitimization draws upon cosmology. Cosmology is inscribed into architecture. The pyramid becomes proof of divine alignment, yet divine alignment fades when belief systems shift. Today, tourists climb Maya pyramids or photograph Egyptian ones without subscribing to the original cosmologies. The structures have outlived their intended meanings. They now function as questions. Questions about human capability. Questions about shared symbolism. Questions about why across oceans the same upward geometry appears. Perhaps the first cry was neither grief nor awe nor fear, but curiosity, a reaching toward unknown. Curiosity compels experimentation. Experimentation yields form. Once form proves powerful, it repeats, and repetition across continents, though independent, feels uncanny, because it reveals that humanity, though scattered, responds to the same sky with similar gestures. Stone rises, shadows lengthen, stars return. The unanswered question beneath the pyramid may not concern lost voyages or suppressed histories, but the enduring mystery of why consciousness seeks elevation at all. Why does the human story again and again choose to answer vastness with vertical stone? Why does the human story again and again choose to answer vastness with vertical stone? Perhaps because vastness is disorienting. The horizon stretches without boundary. The night sky expands beyond comprehension. Time moves forward with indifferent momentum. In such immensity, the human figure feels small, almost accidental. To construct a pyramid is to resist that smallness, to inscribe intention onto the face of the earth. Intention is visible. It interrupts landscape. It declares that thought has weight. In Egypt, the decision to build pyramids was not merely aesthetic or symbolic. It was deeply tied to theology and kingship. The pharaoh's body, encased within stone, was believed to transform in death, ascending to join the imperishable stars. The pyramid was a mechanism of transcendence, a structured path from mortality to cosmic continuity. In Mesoamerica, pyramids were stages for renewal. Rituals performed atop them were not private but communal, binding society to celestial cycles. Bloodletting ceremonies reenacted mythic events. Public gatherings reinforced shared narratives. The architecture did not conceal death. It elevated life through repetition of sacred performance. Two distinct spiritual frameworks, yet both centered on vertical ascent. Ascent suggests movement, but pyramids do not move. Their stillness contrasts with the motion of stars and seasons. They stand as fixed reference points against celestial drift. Perhaps that is their deeper function, to stabilize perception, to offer a fixed axis in a rotating world. When societies measure time through architecture, they transform space into calendar. The Great Pyramid's cardinal alignment and the careful orientation of Maya temples reflect precision that required generations of observation. These were not spontaneous acts of intuition, they were cumulative achievements. Cumulative knowledge implies continuity, yet continuity is fragile. Egypt's Old Kingdom monumental era did not persist indefinitely. After the construction of the Great Pyramids, subsequent dynasties shifted architectural focus. Rock-cut tombs replaced monumental pyramids as political priorities and resources evolved. In Mesoamerica, pyramid building continued across cultures. Olmec, Teotihuacan, Maya, Aztec, each modifying form and symbolism. Forms migrate within regions even when they do not cross oceans. Within Mesoamerica, the influence of Teotihuacan on later Maya centers is well documented. Trade goods, architectural motifs, and iconography demonstrate interaction. But these exchanges occurred within a connected continental sphere, not between continents. The Atlantic and Pacific remain significant barriers for most of recorded antiquity, and yet ancient seafaring elsewhere complicates assumptions about isolation. Polynesian navigation reached remote Pacific islands long before European exploration. Phoenician traders traversed the Mediterranean and possibly beyond. While no evidence confirms Egyptian voyages to the Americas in antiquity, the broader history of human navigation reveals ingenuity and courage. Absence of proof is not proof of impossibility, but it does anchor interpretation. Without artifacts bridging continents, the resemblance between pyramids remains a convergence, not a transmission. Convergence, however, is profound. It reveals that human societies, when reaching similar developmental thresholds, often produce similar architectural expressions. Agriculture stabilizes food supply. Surplus enables specialization. Specialization fosters priesthoods and bureaucracies. Bureaucracies channel labor toward monumental projects that legitimize power and cosmology. The pyramid emerges at the intersection of surplus, hierarchy, and skyward imagination. Imagination itself is shaped by environment. The desert sky over Egypt is clear, vast, unbroken by canopy. Stars blaze intensely in arid air. In Mesoamerica, jungle humidity can obscure horizon, yet celestial patterns remain visible in seasonal clarity. Both regions allowed sustained astronomical observation. Astronomy breeds humility. It situates human life within larger cycles. Perhaps the pyramid is humility rendered monumental, acknowledgement of cosmic scale combined with determination to participate in it. But humility and ambition coexist uneasily. The Great Pyramid required immense labor. So did the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan. The coordination of such efforts implies social organization capable of compelling or inspiring thousands. Monumentality can be a testament to collective achievement, but also to inequality. The shadow of the pyramid falls differently depending on one's position within society. For rulers, it was immortality. For laborers, it was obligation. For priests, it was instrument. For descendants, it became inheritance. Inheritance carries ambiguity. Modern observers stand before these structures with awe, but also with projection. Some see evidence of lost advanced technologies. Others see testament to disciplined human effort. Some interpret alignment as mystical knowledge. Others as careful empirical observation. Interpretation reflects contemporary worldview. In the 19th and 20th centuries, theories of hyperdiffusion, suggested a single source for global civilization, often rooted in Eurocentric bias. These theories faltered under scrutiny, replaced by models of independent innovation. But independent innovation does not trivialize similarity, it deepens it. If separated societies arrive at comparable solutions independently, it suggests that certain human concerns are universal. Concern with death, concern with time, concern with legitimacy, concern with cosmos. The pyramid answers each. It houses the dead or elevates ritual. It encodes calendars. It legitimizes rulers. It mirrors heavens. The question then shifts. Not why do they resemble one another, but why do humans across cultures consistently translate existential concern into geometry? Geometry offers clarity. Angles are precise. Symmetry reassures. Nature is irregular. Floods unpredictable. Droughts devastating. Political alliances fragile. Geometry resists irregularity. By imposing triangular order upon Earth, societies symbolically counter chaos. Egyptian cosmology explicitly framed creation as emergence of order from watery chaos. Maya myths described cycles of creation and destruction preceding the current world. Order must be reasserted repeatedly. Perhaps pyramids are assertions, not of dominance over other cultures, but of dominance over disorder. Yet disorder always returns. Egypt shifted to new forms of burial and religious emphasis. Maya centers were reclaimed by forest. Teotihuacan fell. The Aztec rose and fell. Spanish conquest altered landscapes irreversibly. The pyramids remained. They remain not because they prevent collapse, but because stone erodes more slowly than memory. Memory fades faster than limestone. If there is a hidden connection between Egypt and the Maya, it may not lie in ships crossing oceans or secret maps buried beneath archives. It may lie in the shared human tendency to confront impermanence with elevation, to look at the sky and refuse to feel small, to gather community around an axis and insist that meaning can be measured. Still, something in the parallel unsettles. Two continents, two monumental traditions, no confirmed bridge, yet the same upward silhouette against sunset. Perhaps the unsettling feeling is not about lost contact, but about recognition. Recognition that humanity, though scattered, shares a psychological architecture as enduring as stone. And if that is true, then the pyramids are less mysteries of geography and more mirrors of consciousness. But mirrors reflect both light and shadow. What shadow of human fear or longing shaped the angles of these mountains of stone? What shadow of human fear or longing shaped the angles of these mountains of stone? Fear does not always shout. Sometimes it settles quietly beneath ritual and geometry, disguised as devotion. Longing does not always declare itself either. It hides within symmetry, within the careful alignment of stone to star. When civilizations devote decades, even generations, to the construction of pyramids, they are not merely building structures. They are negotiating with something intangible. Perhaps that shadow is impermanence. Every agricultural society lives with uncertainty. Crops may fail, rivers may shift course, rain may withhold itself, political alliances fracture, illness spreads invisibly, death arrives without negotiation. To build something that resists erosion becomes an act of psychological counterweight. In Egypt, the concept of Ma'at represented cosmic balance, order maintained against the threat of chaos, known as Isfet. The pharaoh's duty was to preserve Ma'at, not only politically but cosmologically. The pyramid, rising with deliberate geometry, embodied that order. Its angles were not random. They were measured, controlled, intentional. Geometry became theology. In the Maya world, cosmic balance was equally central. Creation myths described previous worlds destroyed before the present one stabilized. The Popol Vuh, recorded in the post-classic period, speaks of attempts at creating humanity before success was achieved. There is fragility in such narratives and the suggestion that existence itself is provisional. If existence feels provisional, permanence becomes sacred. But permanence is illusion. The pyramids have endured thousands of years, yet even they erode. Their casing stones fall, their surfaces crack, the jungle presses inward, the desert wind scours, the slow patience of geology outlives architecture. Perhaps the shadow shaping these monuments was not merely fear of death, but awareness of repetition. Civilizations rise and fall. That is not speculation. It is observable pattern. Egypt's Old Kingdom gave way to intermediate periods. The Maya Classic period dissolved into decentralization. Teotihuacan declined. The Aztec Empire collapsed under Spanish conquest. Power shifts. Narratives change. The pyramid stands as witness to cycles it cannot prevent. In that sense, the pyramid is both defiance and confession. Defiance against time's erosion. Confession that time cannot be stopped. The convergence between Egyptian and Maya pyramids may not lie in shared blueprint, but in shared confrontation with cyclical uncertainty. Both cultures embedded time into architecture. Egyptians oriented monuments to cardinal directions, perhaps using circumpolar stars to define north. The Maya aligned temples to solstices and equinoxes, tracking solar zenith passages and Venus cycles. The sky offered predictability in a world otherwise unstable. Predictability calms fear. If the stars return reliably, perhaps order persists. Yet astronomical precision also reveals change. Precession shifts star positions over millennia. Venus cycles vary subtly. Eclipses interrupt regularity. The sky is not static. It is dynamic within longer rhythms. Ancient astronomers may not have understood precession in modern terms, but they observed drift across generations. Knowledge required updating. Perhaps the shadow was awareness that even the heavens are not perfectly fixed. The pyramid, anchored to earth, contrasts with celestial movement. It becomes a static counterpart to a moving sky. But static does not mean eternal. The social systems sustaining pyramid construction were fragile. Egypt's ability to mobilize labor during the Fourth Dynasty depended on agricultural surplus and centralized authority. When resources strained or political cohesion weakened, pyramid building diminished. The Maya likewise relied on intricate political networks. Warfare between city-states intensified during certain periods, inscriptions recording victories and captures. Political instability could disrupt monumental projects. Thus, monumentality thrives in confidence and declines in fragmentation. Confidence may arise from belief in cosmic alignment, but belief is vulnerable. When Spanish clergy burned Maya codices in the 16th century, they extinguished vast libraries of knowledge. The destruction was not merely physical, it severed continuity of understanding. Egyptian hieroglyphs, once common literacy among scribes, became indecipherable for centuries until modern scholarship restored their voice. Silence can be imposed. Does that mean history has been rewritten deliberately? Not necessarily in the conspiratorial sense, but certainly filtered. Conquest reshapes narrative. Religious transformation reframes meaning. Academic paradigms emphasize certain interpretations while dismissing others. The story of independent development between Egypt and Mesoamerica is supported by strong archaeological evidence. Yet the very need to assert independence so firmly reflects historical overcorrections against earlier speculative diffusionism. Between overconfidence in connection and overconfidence in separation lies nuance. Nuance acknowledges that human cognition, environmental adaptation, and social organization can independently generate similar outcomes. It also acknowledges that gaps in evidence remain. Submerged coastlines from the end of the last ice age are only partially explored. Underwater archaeology continues to evolve. While no credible data link Egyptian and Mesoamerican cultures directly, the broader map of ancient human movement is still being refined. But perhaps the shadow shaping pyramids is not geographical uncertainty, but existential memory. Memory of vulnerability, memory of survival, memory that civilizations are not permanent. When societies reach complexity sufficient to build monuments, they may already sense fragility. Monumental architecture then becomes both celebration and warning. Celebration of present strength, warning of future decline. The pyramid stands long after the ideology that built it fades. Visitors today project modern questions onto ancient stone. Some search for lost technologies, others seek spiritual resonance. Scholars examine tool marks and quarry sites. Tourists capture photographs at sunset. Each interpretation reveals more about the present than the past, and yet the past whispers through geometry. The silhouette of a pyramid at dusk evokes something primal, an axis, a boundary, a summit. It evokes ascent. Ascent is not merely physical, it is aspirational. Human beings strive upward metaphorically, toward knowledge, transcendence, meaning. Perhaps the shadow behind pyramids is longing for transcendence in a finite life, longing to rise beyond soil, longing to ensure that memory outlasts flesh. If Egypt and the Maya independently shaped that longing into stone mountains aligned with stars, it suggests that transcendence is a shared human pursuit. But transcendence does not eliminate fear. It coexists with it. The angles of pyramids may therefore encode both aspiration and anxiety, order and uncertainty. The question of why two distant civilizations built similar structures may ultimately be less about contact and more about confrontation. Confrontation with mortality, confrontation with chaos, confrontation with the infinite. And perhaps the deepest shadow is recognition that no monument, however precise, can permanently still the turning of time. Stone rises, stone erodes, stars return, civilizations breathe in and out. If the pyramids are mirrors of human consciousness, then they reflect not a secret link across oceans, but a shared tension within humanity itself. A tension between the desire to endure and the knowledge that everything changes. And as twilight settles over desert and jungle alike, the pyramids stand not as answers but as enduring questions, angled toward a sky that has witnessed countless rises and countless falls. As twilight settles over desert and jungle alike, the pyramids stand not as answers but as enduring questions, angled toward a sky that has witnessed countless rises and countless falls. Perhaps the most unsettling realization is that the resemblance between Egyptian and Maya pyramids does not require a hidden bridge to feel profound. It is profound precisely because no bridge is visible. Two civilizations separated by oceans and epochs confronted the same vastness and chose the same gesture, upward. That gesture may be the clearest signature of shared humanity, yet shared humanity does not eliminate difference. The Egyptian pyramid, particularly in its Old Kingdom form, was largely sealed. Its inner chambers were hidden, protective, designed to safeguard the body of a ruler whose transformation into a celestial being was central to the theology of the state. The structure's outer perfection concealed interior passages known only to a few. The Maya pyramid, by contrast, often invited ascent. Broad staircases rose openly toward temple shrines where rituals unfolded in public view. The act of climbing was participatory, at least symbolically. It dramatized proximity to heaven. Closed ascent versus open ascent. Hidden transformation versus performed renewal. The forms resemble one another, yet their ritual lives differ. This distinction complicates any simplistic narrative of copying. It strengthens the case for independent development shaped by distinct cosmologies. And yet, beneath these differences, the same architectural grammar persists. A broad base, narrowing tiers, summit oriented toward sky. Architecture can converge even when theology diverges. Perhaps the human mind, when attempting to spatialize the sacred, gravitates toward triangular stability because it feels inevitable. The pyramid distributes weight efficiently. It rises without requiring advanced tensile materials. It can be built incrementally, layer by layer. But engineering efficiency alone cannot explain its symbolic potency. A simple mound could have sufficed for burial, a flat platform for ritual. The decision to elevate so dramatically implies excess, a desire to amplify meaning. Amplification may stem from collective identity. When a society constructs something monumental, it affirms its coherence. The pyramid becomes not only a sacred object but a social mirror. It reflects cooperation, hierarchy, discipline, and belief. And belief can be fragile. Egypt's centralized authority waned after the Old Kingdom. Power fragmented among regional leaders. Later dynasties reimagined royal burial practices. Monumentality evolved. In Mesoamerica, political rivalries intensified among Maya city-states. Alliances shifted. Warfare inscriptions multiplied. Eventually, many great centers were abandoned, their temples reclaimed by forest. If pyramids were meant to stabilize society, why did they not prevent decline? Perhaps because they were not solutions, but expressions. Expressions of confidence in a particular moment. Moments pass. What remains is form. Modern archaeologists continue to refine understanding of construction techniques. Evidence suggests that Egyptian builders used ramps, sledges, and coordinated labor to move massive stones. The mystery lies not in impossible technology, but in human organization. In Mesoamerica, construction often involved rubble cores faced with cut stone, expanded over time. No lost machinery is required to explain the achievement. The wonder lies in persistence. Decades of sustained labor without modern tools. Generations committed to projects whose completion they might never see. Commitment implies vision, extending beyond individual lifespan. Vision requires narrative. Narrative anchors identity and time. The Maya long count calendar projected dates thousands of years into the future. Egyptian king lists trace lineage into mythic antiquity. Both civilizations situated themselves within vast temporal frameworks. Perhaps the upward geometry of the pyramid is also temporal, a vertical representation of layered time, each tier resting upon earlier ones. If so, then the pyramid is less a mountain and more a timeline rendered spatially. Each layer supports the next. Each generation inherits foundation from previous ones, but inheritance can obscure origin. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in Mesoamerica, they encountered living civilizations whose monumental pasts were already centuries old. When Greek historians described Egypt, they wrote of a culture whose earliest pyramids were ancient even to them. Each era looks back and sees distance. Distance invites myth. Myth can either obscure or preserve. Perhaps the parallel between Egypt and the Maya unsettles because it exposes how much of human history remains distant from us, not only geographically but cognitively. We study tool marks and inscriptions, but the interior experience of those who built and worshipped within these structures remains inaccessible. What did it feel like to stand atop a Maya temple at dawn, watching the sun align precisely with carved stairways? What did it feel like to watch the Great Pyramid's casing gleam under midday light, newly completed, its edges sharp against blue sky? We can imagine, but we cannot inhabit. Imagination fills gaps, sometimes responsibly, sometimes extravagantly. Speculation about lost connections or advanced forgotten technologies often arises from this gap, from the difficulty of accepting that human societies, working with stone and coordination, achieve such precision without supernatural aid. But perhaps it is more astonishing to recognize that ordinary human cognition, multiplied across generations, can accomplish extraordinary feats. The shared upward silhouette of pyramids across continents may therefore be less evidence of hidden bridges and more testament to cognitive universality. Universality does not flatten diversity, it frames it. Within the universal human response to vastness, building upward, infinite variations unfold. Smooth-sided Egyptian pyramids differ from stepped Maya temples, yet both answer the same existential question. How do we situate ourselves between earth and sky? Still, the question does not end there. If monumental convergence is intrinsic to complex society, what does that suggest about our own era? Modern skyscrapers rise in cities across the globe, glass and steel replacing limestone and stucco. They too reach upward, asserting presence against horizon. They too require coordinated labour and technological ambition. Are they so different in impulse? Perhaps the pyramid is not a relic but a recurring form, adapted to materials and ideology of each age. If so, then the resemblance between Egypt and the Maya is not anomaly, but chapter in a longer human pattern, a pattern of elevation, a pattern of aligning ambition with sky, a pattern of seeking permanence in a world that never stops shifting. And as night settles once more over desert and jungle, stars emerging in their ancient constellations, the pyramids continue to cast their silent questions upward. Not about who met whom, not about secret maps buried beneath archives, but about why, when faced with infinite sky, humanity again and again chooses to answer with stone reaching toward light. Stone reaching toward light is a gesture that repeats across time, but repetition does not diminish its mystery. If anything, repetition deepens it. When a form appears independently in distant lands, the question shifts from transmission to inevitability, and inevitability, when traced to its roots, often leads back to something elemental in the human condition. Consider how early civilizations defined sacred space. Before pyramids, there were circles of stones, mounds of earth, carved pillars rising from plains. At Göbekli Tepe, massive T-shaped limestone pillars were erected more than 11,000 years ago, long before Egypt's Old Kingdom and millennia before the Maya flourished. Hunter-gatherers gathered there, shaping stone not for shelter, but for ritual. The impulse toward monumentality did not begin with empire, it began with congregation. Congregation suggests shared vision. Shared vision suggests story. Stories encode cosmology. Cosmology shapes architecture. If the earliest monuments were attempts to mark sacred thresholds, then pyramids represent the maturation of that impulse, scaled up by agriculture, refined by geometry, intensified by political power. In Egypt, geometry was not abstract. Surveyors measured land annually after the Nile's floods, re-establishing boundaries erased by water. Geometry restored order. The same mathematical understanding that recalibrated farmland could be applied to monumental design. Precision was not mysticism, it was discipline. In Mesoamerica, calendrical calculation was similarly practical. Agricultural cycles depended on solar rhythms. Venus observations may have influenced timing of warfare. Astronomical literacy was embedded in governance. When sky determines survival, sky becomes sacred. And when sky becomes sacred, alignment becomes essential. The alignment of pyramids with cardinal directions and celestial events may therefore reflect pragmatic spirituality, a fusion of observation and belief. Yet practicality alone does not account for scale. The Great Pyramid's original height approached 146 meters. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan rises roughly 65 meters. Even accounting for technological differences, these are extraordinary undertakings. Scale communicates power. Power, in ancient contexts, was often justified cosmologically. If a ruler could claim alignment with celestial order, his authority transcended mere force. Monumental architecture materialized that claim. Still, materialization is fragile. Egyptian pyramids were looted in antiquity. Maya temples were abandoned. Spanish colonizers dismantled structures for building materials. Earthquakes damaged others. The permanent sought was never absolute. and yet enough remains to spark modern fascination. Perhaps fascination arises because pyramids feel timeless. They are not easily contextualized within a single narrative. They resist domestication. Even stripped of colour and ritual, they retain presence. Presence invites speculation. Speculation, however, must be tempered by evidence. To date, no credible archaeological or genetic data confirm contact between ancient Egypt and pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. The distances involved are immense. Maritime technology capable of sustained transoceanic travel has not been documented for these civilizations in the relevant periods. But the absence of contact does not negate the shared upward form. It amplifies it. Because if independent cultures separated by oceans constructed similar monumental geometries, it suggests that the human mind under certain pressures converges toward analogous solutions. Convergence is not coincidence in the trivial sense, it is patterned response. Biologists observe convergent evolution in unrelated species adapting to similar environments. Wings emerge in birds and bats. Streamlined bodies appear in dolphins and sharks. Function shapes form. Perhaps existential environment shapes architectural form. The existential environment includes mortality, unpredictability, or hierarchy, memory. Under those pressures, the pyramid may be an architectural adaptation, a stable structure resistant to collapse, a visible axis organizing community, a cosmic instrument aligning earth with sky, an anchor in time, yet anchors can also confine. When societies invest heavily in monumentality, resources concentrate in symbolic projects. Agricultural strain, political conflict, and environmental change can destabilize that balance. The Maya collapse demonstrates that monumental sophistication does not guarantee resilience. The same can be said of Egypt's transitions between centralized and fragmented rule. Thus, the pyramid embodies both aspiration and vulnerability, aspiration toward transcendence, vulnerability to collapse. Perhaps the similarity between Egypt and the Maya unsettles, because it reveals how universal this tension is. Different languages, different deities, different crops, yet the same triangular silhouette. It is tempting to search for hidden knowledge, advanced mathematics lost, technologies erased, maps burned. Such narratives captivate because they promise revelation. But perhaps the greater revelation is more intimate. Perhaps the reason pyramids resemble one another across continents is not because of secret contact, but because humanity itself carries a deep, shared architecture of thought. We stand upright, we gaze upward. We imagine layers of existence. We fear oblivion. We crave continuity. Given stone and surplus, we build mountains. If this is true, then the pyramid is less a relic of ancient mystery and more a recurring expression of cognitive structure. Still, questions remain. Why pyramids rather than domes? Why triangles rather than arches in these early monumental contexts? The art requires advanced understanding of tension and compression. The pyramid relies on gravity's cooperation rather than its negotiation. Perhaps early monumental builders favoured what was achievable and durable with available materials. Limestone and rubble stack more readily into pyramidal forms. Form follows feasibility. Yet feasibility does not eliminate symbolism. The angle of ascent, the narrowing towards summit, creates visual drama. It invites gaze upward. It directs attention. Attention shapes belief. When a society directs collective attention toward a monumental axis, it reinforces shared orientation, not only spatial, but ideological. In this sense, pyramids are technologies of focus. They focus gaze. They focus labour. They focus narrative. Egypt and the Maya may never have exchanged goods or myths, but they both understood focus. They both organised society around vertical statements, and those statements endure. As modern observers, we inherit their shadows. We walk among ruins, projecting our own questions onto ancient stone. We debate diffusion versus independence, technology versus ritual, collapse versus adaptation. But perhaps the most enduring question is quieter. If two civilizations separated by oceans and centuries both responded to the vastness of existence by raising stone toward the stars, what does that reveal about us? That we are drawn upward, that we resist flattening into soil, that we answer silence with geometry. The pyramids do not speak of secret ships crossing unknown seas. They speak of something more persistent, a shared human impulse to confront infinity not with surrender but with structure. And as stars return once more over desert and jungle alike, the upward silhouettes remain, not as evidence of lost connection, but as reminders that humanity, though scattered, carries within it the same restless inclination to build against the void. To build against the void is not an act of defiance alone, it is also an act of memory. Memory requires structure. Without structure, it dissolves into fragments, impressions, stories told and retold until their edges blur. Stone, by contrast, preserves contour. It fixes intention in space. When ancient builders raised pyramids, they were not only responding to cosmic vastness, they were attempting to stabilize remembrance itself. In Egypt, the name of a pharaoh inscribed within a pyramid complex was meant to endure. The preservation of the royal name was synonymous with continued existence. To forget a name was to extinguish it. Thus, monument and inscription intertwined, ensuring continuity beyond the fragile span of flesh. In Mesoamerica, stelae carved with glyphs recorded accessions, victories, astronomical events. Dates were not incidental, they were essential. The Maya inscribed their place within vast cycles, embedding rulers into cosmic chronology. The pyramid became both backdrop and anchor for those inscriptions, yet memory preserved in stone is selective. It privileges rulers, priests, dynasties. The labourers who hauled blocks and mixed mortar left few records beyond occasional graffiti. Their stories are largely silent. Silence does not negate contribution. Perhaps the shared silhouette of pyramids across continents is partly a testament to collective labour, to the capacity of organised communities to shape environment profoundly. If so, then the resemblance between Egyptian and Maya monuments reflects less a hidden connection and more a universal threshold, the moment when societies acquire the capacity to coordinate thousands toward a single architectural vision. Coordination requires communication. Communication requires trust or authority. Authority often justifies itself through cosmology. The sky thus becomes not merely a backdrop, but a legitimizing force. When pyramids align with celestial events, they do more than mark time. They weave governance into the fabric of the universe. A ruler who controls ritual timing appears synchronized with the cosmos itself. In Egypt, alignment with circumpolar stars, the so-called imperishable stars, may have symbolized eternal continuity. In Mesoamerica, the descent of light and shadow along temple staircases dramatize cyclical renewal. Light becomes narrative. Shadow becomes reminder. But shadows lengthen. Even the most meticulously aligned monument cannot halt social transformation. Trade routes shift, resources deplete, ideologies evolve, empires fragment. Egypt's monumental phase gave way to new architectural forms, temples carved into cliffs, tombs hidden in valleys. The Maya region saw later centers emerge in different configurations. The Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan constructed its own pyramid temple complex, inheriting and transforming earlier traditions. Forms persist regionally even as meanings shift. This persistence complicates the idea of singular origin. Pyramidal architecture appears not once but repeatedly within Mesoamerica, adapted by different cultures over centuries. Similarly, Egypt's pyramid phase was part of a broader architectural evolution, not an isolated event. Thus, resemblance across continents may mirror recurrence within continents. Recurrence suggests that once a form proves powerful, structurally and symbolically, It propagates locally through imitation and adaptation. But imitation across oceans is unsupported, and yet the broader human pattern remains. Across the world, monumental structures rise vertically. Ziggurats in Mesopotamia, stepped platforms in Southeast Asia, temple mountains in Cambodia, independent traditions converging on elevated sacred space. The convergence may indicate that verticality is the most intuitive architectural metaphor for transcendence. Transcendence requires contrast. Earth is horizontal, sky is vertical. To bridge them is to build upward. Still, the question of why Egypt and the Maya evoke particular fascination persists, perhaps because both civilizations achieved extraordinary astronomical sophistication. Both integrated cosmic cycles deeply into architecture and ritual. Both left behind monuments so enduring that they continue to dominate modern imagination. And both experienced dramatic transformations, episodes often described as collapse. Collapse narratives captivate because they hint at vulnerability within achievement. They suggest that no matter how monumental the architecture, societies can falter. If pyramids are attempts to resist time, collapse reminds us that resistance is partial. The structures endure, the systems that built them change. Modern scholars debate the causes of Maya decline: prolonged drought, internecine warfare, over-exploitation of resources. Egyptian historians analyse shifts in trade, climate variability, and political fragmentation. No single cause suffices. Complex systems rarely fail for simple reasons. Perhaps this complexity is itself instructive. If Egypt and the Maya independently built pyramids under conditions of surplus, stability, and cosmic orientation, and later faced fragmentation under stress, then the pyramid stands as a marker of peak integration, a moment when society, environment, and cosmology were synchronized. Synchronization is fleeting. The sky's cycles continue, but human alignment with them wavers. What if the resemblance between pyramids across continents is not a relic of lost contact, but a reminder of shared aspiration? Aspiration toward integration. Integration of sky and earth. Integration of power and belief. Integration of memory and material. When integration holds, monumentality flourishes. When it fractures, monuments remain as witnesses. Perhaps the real mystery is not why they resemble one another, but why humanity repeatedly seeks to stabilize itself through elevation. Is it insecurity? Is it reverence? Is it ambition? Perhaps it is all three. Stone does not answer, it only persists, and in persisting, it confronts each new generation with the same quiet inquiry. What would you build if you wished to be remembered? What shape would you choose to anchor your story against the vastness of time? The Egyptians chose smooth, gleaming slopes aligned with cardinal directions. The Maya chose stepped terraces crowned with temples that caught equinox light. Both chose upward. The ocean between them remained wide, yet the sky above them was shared. Under that shared sky, separated by geography but united by perception, human beings raised mountains where none had existed, not to connect continents, not to signal secret kinship, but to articulate in stone a response to infinity. And as darkness deepens and stars emerge once more over desert and jungle alike, the pyramids stand, patient, angled, silent, reminding us that across oceans and ages, humanity has answered the same vast question with the same enduring gesture. The same enduring gesture, repeated in distant lands, invites one more layer of reflection, not about stone, but about time itself. Time is the true ocean separating civilizations. Geography may divide continents, but time obscures intention. The Great Pyramid was already ancient when the first monumental cities of the Maya began to rise. By the era of Chichen Itza's prominence, millennia had passed since Khufu's reign. Their timelines did not overlap in ways that would allow for direct exchange, yet the human concerns animating their architecture feel startlingly contemporary. Perhaps that is why the resemblance unsettles. It compresses distance. It collapses chronology into silhouette. When we look at the outline of a pyramid against a fading sky, we do not immediately see 2600 BCE or 800 CE. We see shape. We see ascent. We see geometry resisting erosion. In that moment, Egypt and the Maya feel less like separate civilizations and more like parallel responses. Parallel responses to what? To finitude. Human life is brief. Civilizations are longer but not permanent. Even mountains erode. The night sky, though seemingly constant, shifts imperceptibly across millennia through axial precession. Constellations drift. Pole stars change. The ancient Egyptians aligned structures to north, perhaps using circumpolar stars that appeared never to set. Yet even those stars shift over thousands of years. What was once fixed becomes fluid. The Maya tracked Venus cycles with precision, integrating them into ritual calendars. Yet Venus too follows complex patterns that require recalibration. Nothing stands entirely still. The pyramid, though massive, is not immune. Earthquakes have altered angles. Erosion has softened edges. Human intervention has removed casing stones and toppled facades. And yet, enough remains to assert presence. Presence against impermanence may be the deepest common thread. Consider the symbolic layering within both civilizations. In Egypt, later religious reforms under Akhenaten temporarily reoriented worship toward the Aten, the sun disk, disrupting older traditions before being reversed. In Mesoamerica, successive cultures inherited and reinterpreted sacred sites, building atop earlier foundations, meaning shifts, but structure persists. Perhaps the resemblance between pyramids reflects not shared origin but shared process. The human tendency to build over previous certainties, to layer new cosmologies upon old foundations. Each pyramid may conceal earlier iterations within its core. Archaeologists have discovered inner chambers and earlier phases entombed within larger constructions. The visible form is often the final expression of multiple experiments. The same may be true of ideas. Ideas accumulate, refine, layer. By the time a civilization erects its most iconic monuments, it stands atop centuries of intellectual sediment. Egypt's 4th dynasty pyramids were the culmination of architectural evolution, beginning with Mastabas and the Step Pyramid. Maya temple complexes evolved from earlier platforms and regional influences. Nothing appears fully formed. Yet when viewed from distance, across oceans and centuries, the final forms resemble one another in silhouette. Silhouette conceals detail. Detail reveals divergence, but divergence does not erase resonance. Resonance may arise from shared environmental thresholds. Agriculture allowed population growth. Population growth required governance. Governance required legitimacy. Legitimacy drew upon cosmology. Cosmology manifested in architecture. This sequence unfolded in multiple regions independently. Independence, however, does not eliminate wonder. It amplifies the realization that humanity, when reaching similar stages of complexity, expresses similar archetypes. Archetype is not blueprint, it is pattern. Pattern emerges from repeated experience. Repeated experience includes observing the sun's path, the star's rotation, the inevitability of death, the recurrence of seasons. Under such experiences, the mind seeks axis, a fixed point around which flux rotates. The pyramid becomes that axis. It is not the only possible axis, but it is a compelling one. And yet, there remains a lingering curiosity. If pyramidal architecture is such a natural expression of human cognition under certain conditions, why did it not emerge everywhere? Why not in every early civilization? In Mesopotamia, ziggurats rose, stepped towers with ritual function. In Southeast Asia, temple mountains mirrored cosmological peaks. In the Andes, terraced platforms ascended mountainsides. The form varies, but the impulse toward elevation recurs. Perhaps elevation is universal. Pyramids are one of its most stable expressions. Stability matters. Stones stacked in diminishing tiers resist gravity efficiently. Arches require keystones and precise tension management. Pyramids rely on compression. Early engineering favoured what endured. But endurance is not only structural, it is symbolic. When modern observers stand before the pyramids of Giza or the temples of Tikal, they feel a continuity that transcends language. The stones speak without words. They speak of effort. They speak of alignment. They speak of intention. They do not speak of secret voyages or hidden maps. The allure of hidden connection between Egypt and the Maya persists, partly because humans are drawn to unity. A single origin, a lost mother civilization, a grand forgotten narrative. These ideas comfort by simplifying complexity, but complexity may be the truer inheritance, multiple origins, independent convergences, parallel developments. The ocean remains an ocean, the sky remains shared. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the most profound connection between Egypt and the Maya is not historical, but existential. Both civilizations, in their own ways, confronted the same cosmic indifference and responded with architecture that declared presence. "We are here," the pyramids seem to say. "We have measured the sky. We have anchored time." And yet, they also whisper something quieter. "You too will pass." The stones endure, but the hands that place them do not. The resemblance across continents becomes less a mystery of contact and more a meditation on continuity. Continuity of mind, continuity of aspiration, continuity of vulnerability. As the night deepens and constellations wheel slowly overhead, Orion rising above the Sahara, the same Orion once visible above the forests of Mesoamerica. The pyramids stand as fixed shadows against moving stars. They do not resolve the question of why two distant civilizations built similar monuments. They embody it. They hold the question in their angles. They carry it in their silence. And perhaps that silence is the truest inheritance, not an answer carved into stone, but an invitation to consider what it means that, across oceans and ages, humanity has so often chosen to answer infinity with an upward line. An upward line drawn against infinity is never only a line. It is a declaration of perspective. Perspective shapes what a civilization chooses to remember, what it chooses to monumentalize, and what it allows to fade. The resemblance between Egyptian and Maya pyramids may not require a physical bridge across oceans, yet it gestures toward a bridge of perception, a shared inclination to see the world as layered, ordered, and vertically oriented. Layering is fundamental to both landscapes and consciousness. In Egypt, the Nile deposited silt year after year, layering fertility upon dryness. Villages and temples rose along its banks, sometimes atop older settlements. In Mesoamerica, jungle growth concealed and preserved older structures beneath new ones. Archaeologists frequently uncover pyramids nested within pyramids, earlier temples encased inside later expansions, as if each generation sought to preserve what came before while asserting its own presence. This architectural layering mirrors how civilizations process time. They do not erase entirely. They incorporate, reinterpret, and build over. Time becomes sediment. The pyramid, then, is not simply an ascent, but a compression of history. Each stone rests upon previous labour. Each tier depends upon earlier alignment. Remove the foundation, and the structure collapses. Perhaps that is why the similarity between Egypt and the Maya resonates. It reveals a shared understanding that stability requires foundation, literal and symbolic. Symbolic foundations are cosmological. In Egypt, creation myths described a primordial mound emerging from watery chaos. That mound was the first stable land, the origin of order. The pyramid may have echoed that primordial elevation, reenacting creation in stone. In Mesoamerica, the concept of a sacred mountain connecting realms appears repeatedly. Mountains were portals to the underworld and thresholds to the heavens. By constructing artificial mountains, societies recreated cosmic geography within their cities. In both cases, elevation becomes reenactment of origin. Origin stories anchor identity. Identity stabilizes society. Society organizes labor. Labor shapes stone. Yet origin stories are not identical across continents. Egyptian cosmology differs in narrative and symbolism from Maya myth. There is no shared pantheon, no shared script, no shared material culture bridging the Atlantic in antiquity. The resemblance lies not in detail, but in structural metaphor. Structure is powerful because it transcends language. A mountain rising from plain communicates ascent even without inscription. Perhaps that is why pyramids endure as symbols long after their original meanings are forgotten. They communicate through form alone. Modern interpretations often seek hidden codes within dimensions, relationships to pi, golden ratios, astronomical constants. Some claims stretch evidence beyond scholarly consensus. Yet the genuine sophistication of ancient builders should not be understated. They achieve precise alignments through observation and calculation, not mysticism. Still, sophistication alone does not explain why this particular form recurs. It may be useful to consider thresholds again, not only societal thresholds, but cognitive ones. When human groups transition from nomadic to sedentary life, their relationship to landscape transforms. Territory becomes central. Boundaries matter. Permanent structures replace temporary shelters. With permanence comes investment. Investment fosters memory anchored to place. Place, when sacralized, becomes center. Center demands elevation. Elevation clarifies orientation. Perhaps the pyramid is what happens when place, memory, and cosmology converge within a settled society. This convergence occurred in Egypt along the Nile. It occurred in Mesoamerica along river valleys and fertile basins. It occurred elsewhere in varied forms. What unsettles is not that such convergence happened, but that it happened in such similar silhouette across vast separation. Yet separation may not be as absolute as it appears. While no credible evidence links Egyptian and Maya civilizations directly, humanity shares deep migratory ancestry. Tens of thousands of years before pyramids, human populations dispersed across continents, carrying shared cognitive capacities. These capacities include pattern recognition, symbolic abstraction, and spatial reasoning. Given similar challenges, organizing society, legitimizing authority, interpreting sky, similar solutions may arise. Convergence becomes less mysterious when viewed through the lens of shared cognitive architecture. But shared cognition does not negate individuality. The Egyptian pyramid's smooth geometry differs from the stepped terraces of Maya temples. The internal chambers of Giza contrast with the open stairways of Chichen Itza. Ritual practices diverge significantly. Resemblance does not equal identity. Still, in twilight, differences blur. In silhouette, smooth and stepped both resolve into triangular ascent. Silhouette is what remains when detail fades. Perhaps that is the essence of this mystery. Across continents, across millennia, when cultural specifics dissolve, what persists is the shape of human aspiration. Aspiration upward, aspiration toward order, aspiration toward remembrance. The pyramids do not confirm lost voyages or suppressed histories. They confirm something quieter, that humanity, when confronted with vastness, repeatedly chooses elevation as response. And yet, elevation cannot suspend decline. Egypt's old kingdom grandeur yielded to periods of decentralization. The Maya's classic fluorescence transitioned into fragmentation. Monumentality does not inoculate against entropy. Entropy may be the silent partner in every pyramid. To build is to resist decay, even temporarily. Perhaps that resistance itself is the shared thread. If so, then the resemblance between Egypt and the Maya is less about architecture and more about courage. Courage to invest labour in future generations. Courage to align with stars whose cycles outlast lifetimes. Courage to shape Earth despite knowing that erosion will one day soften every angle. When viewed this way, the pyramid becomes an act of faith. Not necessarily religious faith, but faith in continuity. Continuity of community. Continuity of story. Continuity of meaning. Whether or not Egypt and the Maya ever knew of one another, they both enacted this faith in stone. The ocean between them remained silent. The sky above them remained constant. Under that shared sky, separated by time and geography, two civilizations raised mountains from earth and aligned them with light, not to connect continents, but to connect themselves with something larger. And perhaps that is the truest bridge of all. Not a forgotten maritime route, but the persistent human instinct to reach upward, to stabilize the fleeting, and to leave behind a shape that whispers, long after voices have faded, that someone once stood here and dared to answer infinity with stone. Someone once stood here and dared to answer infinity with stone. That daring is perhaps the quiet thread running through every pyramid, whether it rises from desert plateau or jungle clearing. It is not only daring in the sense of ambition, but daring in the face of fragility. To construct something intended to outlast one's own civilization is to acknowledge that civilizations can end. The Egyptians knew this in subtle ways. Their own king lists included periods of disorder between dynasties. Texts from later eras recall times when central authority faltered, when famine and decentralization disrupted what once seemed unshakable. The Pyramid Age did not represent an eternal golden state. It was a phase within a longer continuum of adaptation and reform. The Maya, too, inscribed conflict into their monuments. Steely record warfare, alliances, the capture of rival rulers. These were not naive societies unaware of instability. They lived within tension, within cycles of ascendancy and vulnerability, and yet, in the midst of tension, they built upward. Perhaps upward construction is not a denial of instability, but a ritual acknowledgement of it. When a society perceives forces beyond its control, climate shifts, celestial events, political unpredictability, it may seek to assert coherence through geometry. Geometry is reliable. A right angle does not fluctuate. A measured base remains constant. The precision of alignment to cardinal directions offers a sense of mastery over orientation, even if not over destiny. In this light, the pyramid is not a solution to chaos but a symbolic equilibrium. Egyptian pyramids were oriented to north with remarkable accuracy. Scholars debate the exact techniques used: stellar alignments, shadow measurements, or combinations of observational methods. Whatever the method, it required disciplined observation of the sky. The Maya tracked solar zenith passages and Venus cycles with comparable diligence. Their calendars interlocked in complex ways, creating predictive systems that extended far beyond immediate agricultural need. Why such meticulous tracking? Because predictability grants psychological comfort. When the heavens move in known patterns, human life feels less arbitrary. Yet the sky itself carries unpredictability. Comets blaze unexpectedly. Eclipses darken midday. Meteor showers streak unpredictably across darkness. Ancient societies recorded such events with reverence and fear. Perhaps the pyramid is both tribute and shield, a monument that acknowledges celestial power while attempting to ground it. Grounding does not imply dominance, it implies relationship. Egyptian cosmology intertwined earth and sky intimately. The pharaoh's journey after death was cosmic integration. The Maya viewed kings as intermediaries between realms, performing rituals that sustained cosmic balance. Balance is delicate. When drought struck the Maya region for prolonged periods, The rituals did not prevent political fragmentation. When Nile floods were insufficient, Egyptian authority faltered. Monumentality does not override ecology. This is where the parallel deepens. Both civilizations invested enormous resources in sacred architecture, yet both remained subject to environmental reality. Their pyramids did not guarantee permanence. Perhaps the most haunting similarity between Egypt and the Maya is not architectural form, but shared vulnerability. Vulnerability to climate, vulnerability to internal conflict, vulnerability to the passage of time. The pyramids survive as partial victories, structures that outlasted their original political systems but could not preserve them intact. In this survival, there is a quiet lesson. Monuments endure, but meaning evolves. The Great Pyramid, once sealed tomb of a divine king, is now studied by archaeologists, photographed by travellers, debated by theorists. The Temple of Kukulkan, once a stage for ritual performance, now hosts equinox gatherings of modern observers watching the serpent shadow descend. Ritual shifts, interpretation shifts, the silhouette remains. If there had been contact between Egypt and the Maya, if some ancient maritime network had transmitted architectural knowledge across oceans, one might expect clearer traces, shared motifs, similar inscriptions, hybrid artifacts. Such traces have not been convincingly identified. The absence of evidence suggests independence. And yet independence does not negate interconnectedness at a deeper level. Interconnectedness of human cognition. Across continents, humans perceive verticality as sacred. They organize societies around shared narratives that legitimize power and integrate cosmic order. They externalize memory in stone. This may be less mysterious than it appears, yet it remains profound, because it suggests that humanity, dispersed across geography and time, carries within it a consistent architecture of thought. That architecture responds predictably to certain conditions: surplus, stability, celestial observation, existential anxiety. When those conditions converge, pyramids rise, and when they fracture, pyramids remain as artifacts of convergence. The resemblance between Egyptian and Maya pyramids, then, becomes less a question of who influenced whom, and more a reflection of what influences us all. Mortality influences, uncertainty influences, awe influences, desire for continuity influences. These influences transcend language and geography. Perhaps that is why the parallel feels haunting. It reveals that beneath cultural diversity lies a shared set of preoccupations. The sky unites continents. The cycle of day and night repeats without regard for borders. Under that repetition, humans seek fixed reference points. The pyramid is one such point. It is not the only answer humanity has offered to infinity, but it is one of the most enduring. As centuries pass, interpretations multiply. Some will continue to search for lost advanced civilizations linking Egypt and the Americas. Others will emphasize strict independence and dismiss any deeper resonance. Between those positions lies a quieter realization. The pyramids resemble one another not because of hidden maps, but because of shared humanity. They are convergent responses to a common existential horizon. When viewed in this way, the mystery shifts from geography to consciousness. Why does consciousness so consistently seek elevation when confronting the infinite? Why does it encode time into stone rather than leave it to memory alone? Why does it choose to align with stars rather than remain indifferent to them? Perhaps because alignment offers orientation. Orientation offers meaning. Meaning offers resilience. And resilience, even if temporary, feels like victory against oblivion. The pyramids stand as echoes of that victory, partial, eroded, yet unmistakable. They do not whisper of secret crossings or erased empires. They whisper of the enduring human impulse to measure the sky, to mark the earth, and to leave behind a shape that testifies, quietly but unmistakably, that we once looked upward and chose to answer the silence with structure.